Welcome. I'm excited to have so many people joining us this evening. We have a number of people joining us in person here at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and we also have guests joining us online tonight. So I'm glad that you are able to be here for what should be a really fantastic evening with artist Neil Harpe. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Jill Ferris. I'm the Vice President of Education and Interpretation here at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and this is my trusty assistant, Evan. He's also very excited that you're here. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so you should be used to my previews. Our next and last speaker that we have in 2024 is Professor Tim Walker, who will be here on December 6th. And he'll be speaking about the research that went into his book, Sailing to Freedom, which provided the basis for our latest exhibition, which is next door. He is coming in from Massachusetts and it's really a special treat to have him in conjunction with the exhibition. So I hope you will join. Our speaker programming will pick up again in January, and we have a rather full schedule through about April. I'm very excited. We have a speaker talking about invasive species. We'll be talking about Chessie the sea monster. I have some speakers coming to talk about the future of the Chesapeake Bay restoration. We will be exploring topics related to the Black History Month theme of African Americans in labor. Waterman's Story Swap will be back again if you joined us last year. In January, we'll be hosting Waterman's Story Swap in March this year, and tickets are available. That one did sell out last year, so I would sign up soon. And then I'm in the process of finalizing the schedule for the second Chesapeake Bay Week Film Festival, which is a joint pilot with Maryland Public Television, which will happen in April. So there's a lot coming, and I hope to see you joining us for all that programming. All of our programming is available here in person and then also available virtually. So I think that's a great opportunity that if you aren't able to make it in person, you're welcome to join us online. And if you can't make the program live, the recordings are now being added and uploaded onto YouTube. So you'll be able to follow along and eventually access our speaker program, even if you couldn't attend in person. But back to this evening. I am pleased to welcome renowned artist Neil Harpe. Neil was born in Annapolis, Maryland, where he grew up along the creeks and backwater marshes of the Chesapeake Bay, the region where his family has lived for generations. His artwork, which appears in numerous galleries and private collections, spans a wide range of subject matter and mediums, often reflecting his endless fascination with the maritime heritage of the Chesapeake. He lives and works in Annapolis. In the 1980s and 90s, Neil traveled around the bay photographing Chesapeake scenes that inspired his artwork. These stunning and never before published photographs portray a bygone era, graceful skipjacks and their captains, the bay's unique lighthouses and marshes, Baltimore's vibrant waterfront and fishing ports of Tilghman Island, Deal Island, Crisfield, and Annapolis. Tonight, he will reflect on the photographs and his adventures, which were recently published in Pictured in Time, an artist's journey around the Chesapeake. The book will be available for sale after. Neil will be signing copies, and I will be your faithful cashier. And lastly, I want to add that tonight's event is generously sponsored by the Upper Shore Regional Folklife Center. So without further ado, we're pleased to turn the microphone over to Neil.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. Now I don't have anything to say because you know everything. Actually, no. This book was originally planned to be an art exhibit, actually an exhibit of photographs that I took during the 1980s. A group in Annapolis that calls themselves Fox Road Productions, they're a nonprofit, and they are primarily interested in the history and culture of our region. They got wind of a bunch of photographs that I took only for my own use, so that I could paint, so I could draw, so I had reference material. And they said, well, why don't you show those pictures to the public? They're good photographs, aren't they? And I said, yeah, I took them. So they said, well, let's mount a show. And the question is, where is this show going to be mounted? we thought about doing it right here at the museum. So we talked to them and, well, basically the whole idea came to a halt one day when I was walking my little Chihuahua named Yanni. And I had a conversation with him and thought, you know, an art exhibit's gonna last what, a month? You're gonna get all these the works framed, hung, people come in maybe for the day, the week, and then the whole thing comes down and gets put in storage. That doesn't work for me. I'd like for people to see them for ages. So once again, walking with my little Chihuahua, a book. Why not a book? You could have lots of these pictures in a book, and if people could keep the book on their shelf, they could share it with their friends. It makes perfect sense. So that was a year ago. And from that time until just a couple of weeks ago, I was working with Box Road Productions to write a book of basically the story of my trek through Maryland, primarily the Eastern Shore and the Tidewater area, to find photographs to make my artwork. From 1977, when I graduated from GW with a master's degree in printmaking, until around 1983, I was just teaching art. I wasn't selling art. Basically, what do they say? If you do, you do. If you don't, you teach. So I was finally at a point where, why don't I do something with my artwork other than just teaching other people how to draw and paint? The big change was kind of chance meeting with another artist who was doing what I would end up doing, painting pictures of the Chesapeake Bay area. His name was Dick Harriman. And I decided, well, why not? If he's selling pictures of the Chesapeake Bay, and I grew up in Annapolis, and I'm familiar with the subject matter, why don't I try doing that too? And he was making prints. Okay, prints are what I do. I make etchings, I make lithographs. What kind of prints was he doing? Well, he was just a painter. He was doing paintings and going to a printing company and having reproductions of his paintings made. So I thought, well, you know, I make original prints. I draw my pictures on the plate. I hand roll the ink onto the plate. I run it through a press crank it through one at a time. So that's a whole different kind of print. So I decided, well, I'll make Chesapeake Bay prints that are my kind of prints. So that's basically where it started. I was really at a loss to where to begin. Luckily, I had a friend who said, well, you know, you need a good camera. So, okay, what kind of camera? So I got a Nicker mat. That's the first thing. Okay, where am I going to go take pictures with the Nicker mat? I don't know anybody that makes their living on the water, but luckily my former wife worked at Sea Grant at University of Maryland, and she said, I could probably put you in touch with some people here at the University of Maryland that could help you. So she introduced me to Don Merritt, who is an extension agent for the University of Maryland, and another guy named Don Merritt, whose name is Mutt, that's his nickname. And Don Webster is sitting right over here. And he's the extension agent. Anyway, they got me out on the water. I tagged along with them, taking pictures. And what I really wanted to do was get down and take pictures of watermen actually doing their thing. So how do I do that? Well, these guys introduced me to Wadey Murphy and Russell Dyes, and I went out on skipjacks. Took lots of pictures on skipjacks. I went out with Wadey on the Sigsbee, and I took probably 200 photographs, black and white photographs of skipjacks out on the chop tank. And in one day, there were at least 20 skipjacks on that river. And I got pictures of at least 14 that I could identify by their dredge numbers. So that was kind of like the mother lode of my material for doing my paintings for the next 25 years. But they were all black and white photographs. I thought, I'd like to take some color pictures too. So who else can I go out with? And sure enough, they put me in touch with another guy, Russell Dyes, and I went out on the Catherine. And this time I was equipped with color film, and I got a very, very good pictures of the skipjacks that were out on the river that day. There were only 2 other skipjacks, as opposed to when I went out on the Sigsbee, and there were probably 20 or more. Anyway, long story short, those pictures have served me for the rest of my career as an artist. The book will probably tell you a lot more than I can do up here, being nervous in front of an audience and so forth. I'm much more at ease if I had a guitar that in front of me, and I could hide behind that. Went out on 4 different junkets on skipjacks. Went out with Wadey twice. I went out the second time on the Rebecca Ruark, which is the oldest skipjack on the bay, saying the only one that's still floating, and actively dredging for oysters. That trip, I had a guy tag along with me that he begged me to get him out on a skipjack. This is a guy from Norway. His name was Jan Otto Johansson, and he wanted to go out and be on the water with these people that are sailing under sail. They're going out and it's an actual commercial fishery. Nothing like that in Norway. I said, well, Jan Otto, if you want to go out there this winter, you're going to have to be ready for the cold weather. He said, oh, I am from Norway. We know the cold weather. So I said, okay, well, let me see what I can do. And I called Wadey up, and Wadey said, yeah, you can come, bring your friend, and we'll, And I said, well, when can we do this? He says, well, how about next Tuesday? I don't remember for sure it was Tuesday, but we'll say that it was Tuesday. So I said, Jan Otto, calling him on the phone, come on over on Tuesday morning. You got to be here at like 1 a.m. because we're going to have to be there when they shove off. So Jan Otto shows up at my house in Greenbelt, and we drove from Greenbelt to Tilghman, and Jan Otto and I went out with Wadey, and they dredged oysters on probably the day of the winter. It was, Wadey didn't take off his gloves until we left in the late afternoon when it had just warmed up above freezing. So it was really cold. Poor old Yanni Otto, who said, oh, nothing worried about the cold weather. He stayed below deck almost the whole time. So that was the second time I went out with Wadey. Then I went out one more time on the Caleb W. Jones, and that was kind of a fluke. I was over in D.C. at a music event, and lo and behold, down on the river there was two skipjacks, and one of them happened to be the Caleb Jones. And I'd gotten some really good pictures of the Caleb Jones and the city of Crisfield about 3 or 4 years previous to that, when I went out with Mutt and Don Webster. And we got some great pictures, once again, color pictures of those two skipjacks dredging out on the Tangier Sound. So I told this guy, I went and introduced myself to Dickie Webster, the captain of the Caleb Jones, and I told him I had got some great pictures of his boat a few years previous. And he says, "Well, why don't you come out with me?" I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, when do you want to do that?" He says, "Well, we're dredging out on the just off Annapolis." I said, "Off Annapolis?" He says, "Yeah, we're there's no oysters alive below the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. We have to come up and dredge for oysters that far north." So I met him in Pasadena, and we went out that day, and he was the only boat on the river. And it was so foggy that you could hardly see your hand before you, and it got practically no oysters that day. It was like, oh, what a sad state of affairs the oysters were in the bay in 1991. So that was the last time I went out on a skipjack. But the pictures I took on all those outings have served me well. In the book, there's going to be a lot of other pictures as well as skipjack pictures, though. Originally, this was supposed to be because I did all these skipjack photographs, and the idea that we were going to do an art exhibit or an exhibit of my photographs. That was just about the skipjack pictures, but the book has expanded that to go with a lot of other photographs that I took during the 80s. I took pictures down in the marshes. I took pictures in Baltimore of when the tall ships were there, and went out with a friend to take pictures of the 7-foot knoll lighthouse just before they moved it to the inner harbor in Baltimore. So basically, that's basically what the book's about. It's about the photographs and the artwork that came about as a result of the photos. So if anybody's had any questions, yes. Well, I was trained as a printmaker, so I do a lot of etchings and lithographs, and primarily they're black and white. And then if there's any color, that's hand colored afterwards with watercolor. My paintings are almost always watercolor. So it's either watercolored prints like etchings and lithographs, or they're actually watercolors from the word go. Yeah, I think it's pretty neat too. Anybody else? Yeah.
I got a question. You mentioned Mr. Harriman, right?
Yeah.
I went all the way through school with his daughter, Debbie Harriman.
Oh, yeah.
Grew up in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
What else can you tell me about him? Because I've seen his work, and I think he's done some really nice art.
I'm glad you asked. I met David. I met him. Dick was living in the DC suburbs, and we met in Annapolis because he had a little studio on market space. I'd never met him before. I saw a little sign that said open studio. I went up and checked it out, and we became fast friends. We for 20 years we used to hang out and swap stories and whatnot. He was a very good friend. I missed Dick.
So as you were pulling the photos together, what did you observe in the changes, especially since you've been in Annapolis for so long, How have you observed your subject matter change compared to what you're seeing today?
Oh, it's amazing. In Annapolis in particular, when I was a kid, the city dock was filled with watermen all winter long. We had work boats from as far away as Ewell and um, uh, uh, all over the bay, from Deal Island, and then skipjacks would be in Annapolis once in a while. We'd see boats. I mean, Annapolis was an actual working harbor back then. Sadly, Annapolis's harbor is now called, you ready for this? Ego Alley. And this is because people bring their fancy cigarette boats into the thing to show off, and then they have their gold chains around their neck, and the whole bit. So it's a totally different place in Annapolis, and does that, I mean, my recollection of Annapolis is that way. What else? What was your question again?
Yeah, I think you spent time for the book. You spent time pulling and going back through images.
Yeah.
And so how, in the process of pulling together the book, what kind of reflections did you have in just the change that you see in the world around you?
The change is amazing. I mean, there's the whole idea of this book is to show what kinds of changes have occurred. During this time, I just mentioned the 7-foot Knoll lighthouse got moved. The bridge in Annapolis, the old drawbridge is gone. I mean, there's just, and I've spent my time for the 20 years that I was out there with my photograph trying to capture that, but it was inadvertent. I had no idea that this was going to happen. I thought that this stuff would be there forever. I was merely taking pictures to do some artwork.
Thank you. If there are other questions, I'm happy to come around with the microphone, or I'll keep asking questions. Yes.
Yeah, when you said you would go like from Greenbelt to Tilghman Island, right? To go out with
Yeah.
like Wadey on his skipjack.
Yeah.
Was the old Tilghman Island Bridge there then? Because I
Yeah,
know
oh,
it's out
yeah.
here in front of the museum now. But
It was there for sure.
Is that what yeah.
Yeah.
And what year, when did they build the new one? Do you know?
I really couldn't
No?
say.
Okay.
I do remember the old bridge though. There were times when I'd get up in the morning and drive all the way down to Deal Island. And you know how far that is.
Right.
So I'd have to get up at 1 and then head out and be driving for hours and get to Deal Island in time for them to leave before sunrise.
But you always went out on someone else's boat, like one of the workers' boats?
Yeah.
Instead of, yeah,
Yeah, I didn't have
to get your pictures. Gotcha.
I never, some of the other artists, I know that this is true, probably of Dick Harriman as well. And Dave Turnbull and other artists that were doing Chesapeake Bay art would go out and hire somebody to take them out on a boat and take a couple pictures of, or take a bunch of pictures of skipjacks and then go back to their studio. And but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be right there and actually see what was going on deck of the skipjack. And that's what I did.
Could you talk a little bit about your work in Baltimore Harbor and in capturing really the industrial side of the maritime trades?
Well, I got lots of photographs of things that I never saw when I was growing up, like tugboats. My God, they're so big. I didn't go up there to document them. I just found it very fascinating and uh, um, artistically good subject matter. Um, um, I read in the newspaper that the tall ships were going to be in Baltimore, so I was there with my cameras, took pictures of them. I always thought that Baltimore was an interesting place. I went to Maryland Institute for a year, so I've lived in hung out in Baltimore for that time. I don't know.
Sharon, here's,
I have two questions. One, where did you teach? But two, when you do your work, was it important that you use your own photos in your work?
Yes.
And so but you would take your photos and change it, like move the ship or use it as reference, or do you do it exactly the way that the photo
That's a very good
presents itself
question.
or?
That's a very good question. When I was in graduate school, one of the name of my thesis project was juxtaposition of realities. And it was the idea of taking images and incorporating them with other images to create a whole new reality. And that's basically what I've done with all my artwork. So if I took pictures like out on the chop tank of 14 different skipjacks, there's no picture that I've ever created that was like that photograph. I would take maybe one from this photograph and incorporate it with one and try to create my own reality. Because they're sailing craft, I'd always have to be very careful because there is a factor of, the wind direction. So if you take one and put it, yeah, well, it's like the old 19th century ship portraits, and you'll see that the sails are going one way, but the flag is going the other way. And of course, that's artistic license. You can do that. But when you're doing Chesapeake Bay art and you want to make sure that somebody doesn't say, hey, wait a minute, how could he be going that way and he be going that way in the same picture? I taught at Northern Virginia Community College, 2 campuses. All right, I'm a graduate of the Corcoran School of Art. That was the first school that I graduated, 4-year program. I also went to GW for my MFA in lithography and printmaking. When I got my graduate degree, I was teaching art courses in colleges in 4 different locations, almost simultaneously. So sometimes I'd get up in the morning and drive to DC and teach at the Corcoran, my old alma mater. Other times I'd be driving all the way out to Manassas, Virginia to teach drawing class. And then another time I'd be at Bailey's Crossroads in Northern Virginia teaching there. I did that for 7 years and it got pretty old. And that was when I decided, okay, we could do this forever and never get a full-time teaching gig, or I could go out and actually make art and sell art. And that's Dick Harriman made that idea come to me. Anyway, yes.
Why did you pick the camera that you picked?
Oh, good question. My very good friend at the time had a beautiful Nikon F model, and I coveted it, but it was too expensive to buy one like it. So I tried my best to find a Nikon F like my friend John's, and somebody says, well, you could buy that, the cheaper model called a Nickermat. It's got the same, um, bells and whistles for a lot less money. So that's basically why I bought it. I bought a Nicker mat wanting to have a Nikon F. And the beauty of it is the Nikon F is kind of clunky. It's big and the Nicker mat was so much more comfortable to use as it turns out. And besides that, I could afford to have not one, but as it turns out, I needed another one because I wanted to take pictures with a wide angle lens. So I could go out when I was out on the Sigsbee with Wadey that first time, I had two cameras, one with both Nicker mats, one with a 35mm wide angle lens and the other with a regular 50mm lens. And between the two, I could take pictures of everything that was in front of me.
I saw another.
Oh, I wanted to know how, when you comes to your art, like some of the lithographs, how many prints would you make from it?
The earliest ones were editions of 100. Later, I made some editions that were like 200, 250. Obviously, I did not print them all by hand. I was working with an atelier up in Vermont, and wonderful printer named Mel Hunter. And actually, I read his book, and he was really responsible for all of the lithographs I did, because he had published a book in 1984 that really became the Bible for all of the lithographs that I did. And I wrote him a letter and asked him if he had some suggestions of who can print these things for me. And he says, yeah, me. So I ended up collaborating with Mel Hunter, and he did all of my printing.
What was that transition like to go from teaching to committing to making art full time? And how, it takes a while to drum up your business. So talk a little bit about getting started as a full-time artist.
Not easy. I mean, you become a part-time salesman and a part-time artist, because if you're making prints, you have to get out and sell them somewhere. And I never had a person on the road selling my art for me. So I would spend as much time in my studio and on the road selling my prints. At one point, I was selling my lithographs to dealers all over not only all over the East Coast, but I even sold some to a dealer in Japan. But I missed the classroom. I missed having students that I could share my thoughts with. But I never regretted going off and being making a living as an artist rather than as a teacher.
Well, and so you talked a little bit about the process of making this book, but go a little further. Tell us, how did you determine what went into the book? How did you approach the groupings? What's your structure? And then what was your publication process like?
The book is structured primarily in a chronological order. It kind of tells the story of my quest to find photos to make artwork from. And it starts in 1983 and follows that straight through till the late 90s. It's not the first book that I've done. I illustrated a book for Sea Grant that is about the Chesapeake fisheries, and that came out in the late 90s. Actually, no, it was 91. It was the early 90s. Yeah.
When it came to your artwork, what are the sizes of most of these prints? 8 by 10, 11 by 14?
Well, let's see.
Or bigger?
If there's one that That one's about this big. And some of them are real small. Now that's a lithograph of a hand tong, I mean, of a patent tong. And it's about this big, like 8 by 10. Here's Wadey.
What did you prefer, the etchings or doing the lithographs? I know lithographs are a little easier than etchings.
Well, they're not any easier. They're just different. Lithographs can be a drawing done on a slab of limestone and processed. The process alone is complicated. And when you hear lithographs nowadays, a lot of people think of commercial printing, but lithographs are a hand are a printmaker's medium as well. So I wouldn't say that a lithograph is any easier or any more difficult. It's just different from etchings. Etchings you draw on a metal plate through a resist, and in other words, you scratch through a coating, and then you put it in a vat of nitric acid or other chemical that etches the lines that you make into the plate. With a lithograph, you draw with a greasy medium, and then you process it so that the areas that you're drawing on attract the ink when you roll ink across with a roller, and you keep it wet with a sponge, so the water and the water repels the ink, and the ink sticks where the drawing was done. Yeah.
So maybe two questions for you.
Yeah.
In looking at your pictures here and your art, maybe tell us a little bit about the creative process and what spoke to you? You know, was it the wind? Was it the movement? Was it the symmetry? Was it the light? And maybe all those things. But tell us a little bit about
You
that.
just answered your question.
What
the
kind of
last
guitar do you
statement.
play?
A lot of these pictures, the ones that are lithographs in particular, are done in black and white. So, and a lot of the photographs that I work from are black and white. So a lot of the color is just totally imaginary. It comes from my memory, like having been there to see these, like the skipjacks, for example. But the color is just, it comes out of my own creativity.
And then the second question was, what kind of guitar do you play?
Brand or style?
Yes.
Okay. I play mostly country blues. The music that was recorded back in the 1920s and 1930s by people like Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton and Memphis Minnie and a lot of these other classic blues singers from a bygone era. I got really into that whole guitar thing when I was in high school, and I've done it ever since. Martin guitars, Gibson guitars, Taylor guitars, you name it. I've played them all. I've don't like to sound like I'm bragging, but I've probably owned more guitars than just about anybody in the state of Maryland, maybe in the whole United States. It's embarrassing to think that I've had guitars that I sold for hundreds of dollars that are worth, up to $20,000 now. But it was just it's like my artwork. It's catch and release. I do a painting and I sell it and it's gone. And the guitar is the same thing. I wrote a book about guitars. That's one of the other things that I do. I write books about guitars. I don't give very good speeches about the things that I write, but that's what I do.
There, you have several pictures here with Lady Maryland, which is not, at least currently, as far as I know, a working boat. It's more a
No.
teaching boat. I just wondered what your connection was to Lady Maryland.
Oh, yeah. Good question. Yeah, some of this, a lot of this stuff can be read in the book, so you could probably get it a lot more easily than trying to get me to talk about it because I'm nervous up here. But I got a call from Lance Bendan at Bendan Art Galleries in Baltimore, and he said, we're trying to get a bunch of our gallery artists to go out with a boat that we've hired to take pictures of the Lady Maryland. I said, the lady who? And she was just very recently launched, and they were trying to get pictures to sell to raise money for the back then it was called the Lady Maryland Foundation. I think it's got a different name now. So we went out and took pictures of her, and I did a painting, and the Lady Maryland Foundation used it for their poster. And then I did a lithograph. Actually, I copied my own painting. So in a way, I'm plagiarizing myself. I did a new lithograph, hand-drawn lithograph, and it's called Lady in the Mist.
So one of the things that I've noticed in your artwork is that you have a lot of birds, and the birds are in motion or sometimes stationary. Was that intentional? Was that something that you thought about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do think about that. For example, when I went out with Don Webster and Mutt, we went and they showed me this skipjack that had been abandoned. Do you remember that? And she was the seagull. And I took some pictures of the seagull, pulled up on the shore, just left to rot, basically left there to rot, not too far from Deal Island. And I decided to do a lithograph of the seagull. And in the image, I put a picture of a seagull flying off in the distance that was kind of signifying the sad end of the skipjack seagull. When I did the picture of the Thomas Point Lighthouse, I was thinking, what would make a really interesting picture of the Thomas Point Lighthouse? Because everybody's done it. Every artist in the world has done the Thomas Point Lighthouse. I mean, it gets kind of ridiculous. I was driving to visit my parents in Annapolis, driving down from Greenbelt, and this bird flew over the car, and I said, "My God, that looks like an eagle," and it had a fish in its talons. I thought, man, that is really looking pretty cool. And then it dawned on me, well, how about if you did a picture of the Thomas Point Lighthouse with an eagle flying toward it with a rockfish in its talons? And that was the idea that was born driving from Greenbelt to Annapolis. And that meeting of the bird and my car and my eyes was right at the headwaters of the South River on Route 450.
So I guess I also noticed that I think some of the images that have been most compelling to me have been the bridges and the docks and showing the people, not just the boats that are there.
Yeah.
So what has been your artistic approach to capturing people, right? Not just, you're not doing ships portraits.
Well, you don't see a lot of pictures, you don't see a lot of my artwork with a lot of pictures of people. You know, I'm very selective about, because I don't, I'm looking at the image in such a way that I don't want there to be a lot of activity in the picture that would make somebody say, feel that they can't become part of that scene. So I wish I could show you the picture I did of the tall ships. The photographs, there were tons of people in the photographs, but if you get my book, you'll see a picture of the photographs that I took, and then the drawing that I did at the end, and there maybe not even a third of as many people in the picture as from the photographs that I worked from. And it's like most people don't want pictures on their wall of people they don't know. I mean, it's hard to sell a portrait of Joe Schmo to somebody that doesn't know Joe. And for the same reason, why put a lot of people in a scene, but just enough people to make it, to give you some idea of the scale without having to make it look like, well, if I go into that picture with my mind, I'll be intruding on other people's space. Yeah.
The waterman that was, who is the waterman that you have a photo of that's lounging? Is that you? Or
No, that's not me. That's my friend Zoran. Zoran Stamenik, he came, came along with me because of, actually, he was the guy, his father introduced me to the famous Jan Otto Johansson from Norway. He's from Belgrade, and he just a guy that I hung out with. He played guitar with me. We just buddies. And he says, "Well, you going out on the skipjack?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, why don't I come along with you?" So he did. And he also stayed below deck most of the time. And that was aboard the Catherine.
All right, I think last question, and then we'll let you off the hook.
Oh,
You've done a fabulous job,
well,
and I know this is challenging to hold forth for, but you've done a great job of sharing your past with us.
well, thank you very much.
So my last question for you. What is the iconic image that you see when you close your eyes and you think about your artwork and you think about maybe what you've made, what you haven't made yet? What is it that you see in your mind's eye?
You would ask that question. I really don't view my artwork that way. Probably for the same reason that I started going out with my camera. I have to find an image that I find compelling, and that percolates in my mind's eye for enough time that I can decide what I'm going to do with it, or maybe how can I incorporate it into a different reality. So no, if I close my eyes, it's pretty much blank.
Thank you for your honesty, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.